My pregnant wife left me for her lover. You won't believe it. Hey, everyone, today I'm sharing one of the most painful yet eye-opening moments of my life. My pregnant wife made a shocking decision to leave me for someone else. The betrayal, the heartbreak, and what happened after. It's a story you need to hear. Trust me, this is not what you'd expect. Let's dive into it. It was early in the morning. The house was quiet, but something just didn't feel right. For weeks, my wife Emily had been acting strange. She was constantly on her phone, leaving the house more often, and always mentioning these work meetings. That day, instead of going to work, Emily started packing a suitcase. When I asked her where she was going, she turned to me and said, "It's just a short business trip. Don't overthink it." But her nervous smile gave her away. After she left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. So I did something I had never done before. I checked her phone, and what I found left me speechless. There were messages from someone named Daniel. They weren't just messages, they were confessions of love, plans for their future, and even plane tickets. Emily and Daniel were flying to Paris that same afternoon. But that wasn't the worst part. What really broke me was Emily's recent social media post. It read, "Daniel, you've shown me what true love really is. Thank you for being my everything. The best is yet to come." I was stunned. My pregnant wife wasn't just cheating on me, she was flaunting it to the world. But here's the thing, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. If Emily thought she could humiliate me and walk away scot-free, she was wrong. This was just the beginning, and I was about to turn the tables. Stay tuned. In part 2, I'll reveal Emily's shocking plans in Paris and my first big move to take back control. You won't want to miss this. Part 2. The betrayal deepens, my first move against my wife's lover. After discovering Emily's affair, I felt like my world was crumbling. But as the initial shock wore off, a fire ignited within me. I wasn't going to sit back and let her and Daniel ruin my life. If they wanted to play games, I was more than ready to show them how it's done. I started with her plane tickets. Using the confirmation details from the emails on her phone, I called the airline. Pretending to be her, I explained that I needed to cancel the tickets due to unforeseen circumstances. The representative didn't ask many questions, and within minutes, Emily and Daniel's romantic getaway to Paris was no more. Next, I turned my attention to the pregnancy care services I had so generously arranged. Emily had always bragged about the exclusive postnatal care facility I booked for her. It was a luxury service, $15,000 a month for top-tier care. I called them immediately and canceled the reservation. Then I focused on the baby items I had purchased. Cribs, clothes, toys. I returned everything I could and donated the rest to a local shelter. As I loaded the last box into my car, I felt a strange sense of relief. I was no longer funding Emily's lies. But I wasn't done, not yet. That evening, I called a few close friends and invited them over for drinks. I needed the distraction and honestly their support. As we laughed and shared stories, my phone buzzed. I looked down and my smile vanished. It was Emily calling. The room fell silent as everyone noticed my shift in mood. One of my friends leaned in and said, "Man, maybe you should answer. You know how she gets." Another chimed in, "We can wrap things up if you need to deal with this." But I shook my head. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not playing by her rules anymore." When Emily called again, I answered. Her voice came through, sharp and demanding. "Michael, who do you think you are ignoring my calls? If this happens again, you'll be sleeping on the couch for a month." I stayed silent as she continued ranting. And why did the postnatal center call me? Why did they say the reservation was canceled? Do you know how embarrassing that was? Then, the bombshell. "Michael, if you don't fix this, I'll make sure you regret it. You better rebook the center and wire me $15,000 immediately. Daniel and I decided to extend our trip and we need the extra cash." I couldn't help it. I laughed, a real deep, bitter laugh. "Emily," I said calmly, "you've completely lost your mind." Her response was immediate. "What did you just say? Say that again if you're man enough. Do you want a divorce?" Her favorite weapon, divorce threats. For years, I had always caved. I'd apologize, take the blame, and do whatever it took to smooth things over. But not this time. Taking a deep breath, I lifted my glass and said, "You know what, Emily? Let's do it. Let's get a divorce." I ended the call before she could respond. My friends stared at me, wide-eyed and silent. Finally, one of them raised his drink and said, "To your freedom." The tension broke and laughter filled the room. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely happy. Coming up in part 3, Emily's furious response, her parents' shocking intervention, and how I started uncovering the true depth of her betrayal. Stay tuned. You won't believe what happens next. Part 3. The family drama explodes. The shocking truth about my wife's betrayal. The morning after my bold declaration of divorce, I woke up to loud, relentless banging on my door. At first, I thought it was construction noise, but the yelling soon made it clear who it was. "Michael, open this door right now." It was Emily's mom, Karen. Her voice was sharp enough to cut through the walls, and I could hear her husband, Richard, mumbling angrily in the background. I sighed, knowing this was going to be a long day. I took my time, pouring myself a glass of water while their shouting grew louder. When I finally opened the door, Karen and Richard stormed in without waiting for an invitation. "Michael, what on earth are you thinking?" Karen snapped. "How could you cancel the care center and the hospital appointments? Emily is pregnant, for God's sake," Richard chimed in, his arms crossed in his usual self-righteous stance. "And what's this nonsense about a divorce? You're being unreasonable and selfish." I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms, and asked calmly, "Is she coming back with Daniel or alone?" Karen's face turned red. "What are you insinuating? Emily loves you," she said defensively. "Does she?" I shot back. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she's in love with Daniel. Or is he just her vacation buddy?" Karen gasped, clutching her pearls as if I had slapped her. "You're overreacting, Michael. She's going through a phase." I couldn't hold back a laugh. "A phase? Is that what you're calling cheating on her husband while flaunting it online?" At this point, Richard stepped forward, trying to assert his authority. "Listen here, young man. I heard you got a $10,000 bonus recently. When are you giving that to Emily? She's your wife and the mother of your child. You owe her." That was the last straw. I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. "You've got it all wrong. I don't owe her anything. And by the way, that child, pretty sure it's Daniel's." The room fell silent. Karen took a step back, as if she'd been physically struck, while Richard's face turned pale. "Divorce is out of the question," Karen finally said, her voice shaky but determined. "Emily won't accept it. She's your wife. You have a responsibility to her." I straightened up, meeting her glare head on. "My only responsibility is to myself now. Emily has crossed every line, and so have you two by enabling her behavior. This is over, and no amount of guilt tripping will change my mind." Karen and Richard exchanged nervous glances, realizing that I wasn't the pushover they had gotten used to. They tried to argue, but I calmly walked to the door and opened it, gesturing for them to leave. "Tell Emily I'll have her things packed and ready. She can pick them up later, and if she or Daniel show up here unannounced, I'll call the police. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a life to rebuild." Karen shot me a venomous look, hissing, "You'll regret this, Michael. She'll make your life hell." But I just smiled and closed the door behind them. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. Coming up in part 4, Emily's explosive return, the shocking demands she makes, and how her lover Daniel plays a key role in the chaos. Don't miss it. It only gets crazier from here. Part 4. The explosive confrontation. My wife returns with her lover. That evening, I began packing Emily's belongings. Photos, clothes, trinkets, everything she'd left behind was neatly boxed up and placed by the door. I didn't want a single trace of her in my home anymore. Around 10 p.m., the knocking began again, but this time it wasn't just Karen or Richard. As soon as I opened the door, there she was, Emily, standing next to Daniel, her so-called soulmate. Her face was red with fury, while Daniel looked smug, like he'd already won some imaginary battle. "Michael," Emily snapped, "what the hell do you think you're doing? How dare you cancel the postnatal care and appointments and these boxes? Are you seriously throwing me out? I leaned casually against the doorframe, crossing my arms. Emily, you've made it clear where your loyalties lie. You don't get to demand anything from me anymore. She stormed inside, Daniel following close behind. I'm still your wife, she yelled. You can't just cut me off like this. You owe me support, especially since I'm carrying your child. That was it. I'd had enough. I turned to her and said, You mean Daniel's child, right? Don't act like I don't know what's going on. Daniel stepped forward, trying to act tough. Hey, man, there's no need to disrespect her like that. She's been through a lot. I couldn't believe the audacity. I laughed bitterly. Disrespect her? Daniel, she's been cheating on me with you for God knows how long, and now you're standing here in my house acting like the victim? Unbelievable. Emily, sensing she was losing control of the situation, shouted, Michael, stop making this about you. You're being selfish. I've given you everything, and this is how you repay me? I raised an eyebrow. Everything? Like lying, cheating, and draining my bank account? Because that's all I seem to remember. Before she could respond, I pointed to the boxes near the door. Your things are packed. Take them and leave. And as for you, I said, looking directly at Daniel, this is the last time you set foot in my house. If either of you tries to come back, I'll have the police handle it. Emily looked like she was about to explode, but Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, whispering something in her ear. She glared at me one last time before storming out. Daniel followed, but not before muttering, You'll regret this. As the door slammed shut, I stood there in silence for a moment, taking it all in. The house felt quiet, almost too quiet. But instead of sadness, I felt a strange sense of relief. I knew this wasn't the end of the drama, though. Emily wasn't the type to let things go, and Daniel seemed just as toxic. I had no doubt they'd try to make my life miserable. Coming up in Part 5, Emily's shocking legal demands, Daniel's reckless behavior, and the discovery that changes everything. Stay tuned. You won't believe what's next. Part 5. The final showdown. Secrets revealed and justice served. The days after Emily and Daniel stormed out were anything but peaceful. I expected them to stir up trouble, and they delivered. Emily filed a legal complaint demanding financial support, claiming that I had abandoned her and our child. Her lawyer sent me a list of absurd demands. Monthly payments to cover prenatal expenses, continued support for the luxury care facility she insisted on, and of course a share of my recent work bonus. But I had a trump card, undeniable proof of Emily's betrayal. Thanks to a private investigator I had hired, I had everything, messages, photos, even hotel records of her time with Daniel. With this evidence, my lawyer filed a countersuit. We argued that Emily had committed fraud by demanding financial support while cheating, and we sought to block any further claims against me. When the court date arrived, Emily strutted in, confident and ready to play the victim. Daniel accompanied her, looking just as cocky, but their confidence evaporated the moment my lawyer presented the evidence. The judge's expression shifted from neutral to stern as the messages and photos were shown. Emily's face paled, and Daniel fidgeted nervously in his seat. Mrs. Walker, the judge said firmly, it's clear that your actions were deceptive and manipulative. You are not entitled to financial support from Mr. Walker. In fact, you will cover the legal fees incurred by him during this case. Emily's mouth opened in shock. She tried to argue, but the judge silenced her with a sharp look. Daniel, meanwhile, quietly slipped out of the courtroom, leaving her to deal with the fallout alone. As I walked out, Emily hissed, You'll regret this, Michael. I smiled. No, Emily, the only person who will regret anything is you. The aftermath. A few weeks later, I heard through mutual friends that Emily and Daniel's relationship had fallen apart. Daniel, realizing that Emily had lost her access to financial support, abandoned her. Emily tried to salvage her reputation, but people had already seen the truth. Her lies were exposed, and her once perfect image was shattered. She eventually moved back in with her parents, who were tired of cleaning up her messes. As for me, life was finally peaceful. I focused on my career, traveled, and reconnected with old friends. The biggest lesson I learned? Never let anyone take advantage of your kindness. Sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even if it means walking away from people who once meant the world to you. And as for Emily and Daniel, they were just a chapter in my story, a chapter I had finally closed for good. Thank you for watching. If you like this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more incredible real-life stories that will leave you speechless. Until next time.